As I mentioned, this year's meeting is themed Building Tomorrow Together. Building anything worthy usually requires organization, teamwork, and leadership. Often it involves exploring unknown territories, setting direction, and preparing for the inevitable conflict, finding our way through the wilderness. While we may be comfortable in calm waters, it's often the treacherous rapids, the challenges, the obstacles, the change that transform us as leaders. As we traverse our own leadership journey, we can find inspiration and courage together, which helps prepare us for the adventures ahead. I'm delighted to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Carrie Fierke, to help us navigate the wilderness as we build tomorrow together. Dr. Carrie Fierke's passion is to enhance leadership skills, talents, and abilities of the people around her. This passion is based in part on her belief that we all possess untapped leadership potential. Leadership is not a position or a title, and it's not the exclusive domain of the people in power positions. Leadership is a journey, and she encourages everyone to explore where it will take them. Early in her career, Dr. Fierke served in management positions at Honeywell and Medtronic, where she focused on marketing, communication, and education. She later served as manager of leadership and staff development at Essentia Health. In 2011, Dr. Fierke accepted a position with the University of Minnesota College of Pharmacy. In this role, she has advanced the teaching, scholarship, and service of leadership into the core curriculum and her students. Dr. Fierke's most profoundly influential leadership development contribution has been the annual Women Impacting Healthcare Conference. This interprofessional leadership conference is a collaborative opportunity for women and other people in healthcare to gather, continue their journey, and network with colleagues to build a better patient experience. I'm proud to be one of the first people that Carrie shared her idea with when developing the Women Impacting Healthcare Conference. We were sitting in a cafe in New Orleans having lunch during an APHA annual meeting. I remember thinking how awesome her idea was, and I was quite excited when she voluntold me to participate on the planning committee. I've been thrilled to do so for all 5 years of the program so far. The first time I met Carrie, we were both at, I think, the very first Center for Leading Healthcare Change conference that the group had put together. And it was quite a large group, and they needed people to schlep the microphones around to the audience. And I independently got up on one side of the room, Carrie got up on the other side of the room, and we ended up working the room for the rest of the day. I knew from that time, which was the first time I met her, that we would be good friends and colleagues for a very long time. I'm grateful that she accepted my invitation to be our keynote speaker this morning, and I am pleased to now schlep the microphone to her. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Carrie Fierke.
While we get transitioned here, welcome everyone. It really is such a great opportunity to be here. There's no clip, is there? Okay. So if this falls out and you hear a big bang, that's not my fault. I appreciate the opportunity to be the keynote today, especially as I look in this room and see all of the leadership that we have here. Really, the history of MPHA is phenomenal. And your focus on building tomorrow together, as I see students is what I like to say, in the room, what a great opportunity for us to really develop how we want to run the profession in the future. And a special thank you to Jason Barrett and Marsh Milanic for the invitation to be here. I am going to probably be half in light here and there because I can't stand still. And since none of you are here, I'm going to take up this whole space. That's unfair? Yes. So I have presented hundreds of times over the past 2 decades on leadership concepts. But this particular presentation is one I've worked very hard on over the past few weeks, and it really is personal to me. I'm going to do a prezi, so I hope I don't make anyone sick through this process here. But it's really personal to me because I'm going to share with you some stories that I've experienced, some that I have never shared on stage before, or shared during any type of presentation. And also, I'm going to share with you some of my new research concepts, and they're very near and dear to my heart. Can we see it okay? Can we pull it up? Okay, hopefully it doesn't cut anything off further than that, because we've got surprises for you today. So MPHA, right? Minnesota, huge, huge state that we have, and lots of diversity. When you think of southern Minnesota, central Minnesota, northern Minnesota, I'm going to transport you today into this area. We moved into, I'll show you that again because that's pretty cool. That area up here, northern Minnesota. This is the area that I grew up in. So if you're not familiar, northern Minnesota is the heart of the iron ore industry. And I grew up in the central part of that. My dad was 36 years in the mines. And I grew up on a hobby farm. I don't know if students knew that. Did you? Megan's shaking her head no. I don't think I've ever shared that story. So I grew up on a hobby farm, and I spent my summers on a hayfield. That's what I did. And I was surrounded completely by lakes and woods. Northern Minnesota, if you go up there, most of you like to travel north for your summers. That's the area that I grew up in. And it was really important for me because what I found magical about that area was the Boundary Waters Canoe area. Now, if you're not familiar with the Boundary Waters Canoe area, it's a national park. It's over 1 million acres, and it's connected by lakes and portages. So this whole huge area. And I grew up going to the Boundary Waters. So I started that journey when I was very, very young and went all the way through high school and into college. And in the 90s, I was known as the Boundary Waters girl. So I would, after my first year of college, came home and I started a business. I would bring people into the Boundary Waters. That's what I did. And so I brought in 4-H groups. I brought in daughters and dads, church groups. I really spent a lot of time building these relationships. And if you're familiar with this area at all, it's very remote. So when you get started to go, you have your clothes all clean, nicely pressed. You roll them up for space. I see some nods here, Boundary Water veterans, right? You gotta roll them up so that you have space. You put them in these wonderful Ziploc clean bags, and everything's dry. It's all ready to go. All of your food is packed in similar bags because you need to make sure that it's nice and dry and you're able to cook it later. And you're off on your journey, excited about where you're headed. You feel like nothing can go wrong, and you set out with a canoe on your back, packs on, and you go out into the wilderness. And when you come home, you're dirty, you're worn, you're sore, you're enlightened, because there isn't any electricity. There still today is no cell phone service, thank goodness. So you come back stronger and a different person indeed. And I've seen this transformation because, as I mentioned, I brought these tours in over and over, dozens of times with people. It's this transformation that happens that really develops leaders. Think about that. You go through your journey, you're ready to go, you're excited about it. You go through a leadership experience, you come back, you're a little more aware, a little bit bruised up, but you're stronger than when you started. And that's the process of this. So I want to go through a couple of leadership concepts with you. The first being this conscious competence. Now I want to explain to you the structure of it, and then we'll relate it back to our leadership concepts here. So when I started in the Boundary Waters, I wasn't necessarily someone who knew how to do a J-stroke, how to steer the canoe from the back. I didn't necessarily know how to bridge a canoe, which is where you're holding the canoe over your head so someone can slide underneath and carry it. I didn't know what 320 rods were, and that they were 320 rods in a mile. I learned that over time, and for those of you who don't know, a rod is a measurement of space on the map. And you want to know what the rods are if it's your turn to carry either the food pack or the canoe, because that's the things that weigh the most. So when we go through this process, we start off in a conscious competence model. And let me explain this to you. Conscious competence has 4 stages, and I've added one more to adapt that stage. The conscious competence starts off with you're unconsciously incompetent. You start off something by not knowing anything about it, right? We get into a situation and we're like, oh, we weren't even aware that that even existed. So not only are we not aware of it, but we're not even aware to even know what the skills would be. That's unconsciously incompetent. Once we are aware of it, we move into the second stage. We move into the conscious incompetence. Now we're aware of that stage, right? But we still don't know how to do it. So we go through any learning experience aware of it, thinking, oh, this is great, but we don't know how to do it. Hence my kite surfing experience last February. This is great, I'm going to be wonderful at it. I know how to do it, not very good at the skill. Then we move into what we call conscious competence. We are conscious about the actions that we take, and we're competent doing it because we're focused on it. Students, you may be experiencing this right now while you're on rotations. You are very conscious that you know how to do it, and you're competent, but you're really thinking about each step of the way. And then we move into this final stage called unconscious competence. This stage is where we just do what we do. And you walk around and you see these pharmacists and they just do what they do. And they don't even have to think about it. They just have an encounter with someone and they don't even think about how they're talking to someone. They just know how to do it, right? You get into this unconscious competence phase. And then we have a final phase, and I'll talk about this further too, as a reflective competence, leading back to what we've experienced before. So let me take you back on that journey from when I was in the Boundary Waters for the first time. This is going to be a journey of me and my sister. We've gone on a lot of adventures together, and we still continue to do that. Here we are in the unconscious incompetence phase. That's me. I'm not even in the canoe at this point. And if you look really closely, my sister is holding a rake. We are unconsciously incompetent about what we are doing in this situation. And this is where we all begin. We all begin unconsciously incompetent. We don't know where we are. Then we move into the conscious incompetence. Our parents are teaching us how to paddle. You see my dad in the back here. He's explaining to us what the different strokes are. He's explaining to us what we need to do. This is our conscious incompetence. We're now learning it, but we still don't know how to do it. Now, I'm a duffer. That's me. So I'm incompetent still because I'm just sitting in the middle of the canoe. That's what the duffers do. They get to enjoy the view in the middle of the canoe. And as I've done this presentation and I've looked through these and dissected these pictures even more, I now even realize, for those of you who are novice canoeists, that my sister is paddling on the same side as my dad, which is a complete no-no when it comes to paddling a canoe. You want to make sure that your weight is distributed on each side of the canoe. So we are very conscious about what we need to do, but we're still incompetent. Make sense? Gotta love the pictures from the 70s and 80s. All right. So now I'm going to go to our teenage years. Just kidding. I'm actually going to skip the teenage years. This is where all of the growth takes place. When I showed this picture to my kids, they said, "Mom, why are you wearing long underwear or underneath sweatpants?" So this again is the late 80s era. But the teen years, in this particular instance, or in any instance where we're developing ourselves as leaders, those teen years, those are the ones where that's where the biggest growing pains are, right? That's where we're learning how to do things and become experts in our field. So I'll come back to the teen years. You'll be able to see some more big hair pictures. This is our conscious competence phase. My sister and I spent a lot of time going into the Boundary Waters alone. It was the 90s, mid-90s at this point. We're in college, coming back. And we were very conscious about the things that we did. Now, in the mid-90s in the Boundary Waters canoe area, it was a very different time. It wasn't as saturated as it is today. So we were able to load up my dad's truck and drive up to the permit area and just pick a permit place. And our conversations would sometimes go like this. We would pick out our pieces, we'd get everything set, we're excited about how we've packed and what we're planning to do. We'd call home, and for those of you not familiar, this is the rotary phone. We would call home at the park place, and we would leave a message on our parents' answering machine. And it would go something like this. Hi Mom, hi Dad. Okay, we've got an entry point. We're going through entry point 16. We're gonna paddle up through Agnes and go through Oyster. That's our plan. We'll be home in 3 days. If we're not home in 4, come and find us. Love you, bye. So we are consciously competent. We are very, very focused on each experience that we're having. How do we cook? How do we get our wood? What is our pathway? What do we do when we get into a situation or trouble? We have everything really planned out. We even have a route slightly planned. And we also know that if we're not back and forth, we've got some serious problems going on. So we might as well let Mom and Dad know that in advance. So this is our conscious competence. But it's all about being aware of what we're doing each step of the way. And eventually moving into what we call our unconscious competence. So over time and over experiences, we eventually get to this level, and you'll see I'm actually in the middle here. It's a little bit dark color, but I'm in the middle. I have just hooked up 2 canoes on the top, and I'm gonna have 1 more canoe in the bed of that truck. My sister's off to the side. We're getting things ready to go. We're bringing a group of women into the Boundary Waters. So without even thinking about it, being able to set up canoes, being able to pack packs, 3 meals for 3 nights for 7 people that you can carry, so lightweight things. Being able to show them that, you know what, we need to put our tents in these certain places because water's coming, rain's coming, so we don't get wet, all of those nicely packed clothes. We're unconsciously competent. We don't even have to think about these experiences. We can take a look at a map and route it the best way that we can for terrain for the people that we're traveling with. You just get to that level. The thing is that eventually you realize that the people that you're with are a different consciousness than you. And you preceptors in the room today have experienced this, I'm sure, over and over. You are now the leader as a teacher. And Peter Senge explains that leader as teacher, leader is not about teaching people how to achieve their vision. It's about fostering learning for everyone. And so when we are in this leader as teacher model, we are the ones who are helping to guide them. We are the ones now sitting with them in front of their Duluth packs, rolling up clothes, and showing them how to put it in the bags. And you start to understand that there's a differenceness of consciousness when, in this particular instance, these are friends from college that my sister and I brought, and I was helping everyone pack their packs together, their Duluth packs. Everybody got, 2 teams to 1 pack, and I saw someone pack a hairdryer. Remote area, no electricity, and I had to say, whoa, 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 and I compensated the hairdryer. I also looked for crimpers, curling irons, anything that had electricity, because they were in a different place, right? I'm in the unconscious competence. Of course we don't bring that. They're in the unconscious incompetence. they don't know what they need to bring or not bring yet. And that's where it's our job to guide. We need to help people understand how they can learn and help them develop themselves through that process. And you'll see here in the bottom, when I bring tours into the Boundary Waters, it wasn't about I'm doing all the work for them. Maybe I'll carry the canoe in the first time, but it's all about how do we go through this experience together and transform together. So putting up the bear pack, you'll see there's interwoven ropes, showing them how to do that, showing them how to cook over the fire. Because remember, once upon a time, I had to learn how to do that. I was the one who was cooking my meal over a open flame and stove. We don't do that anymore. There's a much better equipment than the way that I did this in the 80s. And putting on a pack. And I will tell you that if it's your first experience in the Boundary Waters, that's probably one of the scariest experiences for people, is putting on a pack and going on their first portage. Because they don't know what to expect. Even if you're strong, even if you're the athlete, having that weight on your back and not sure of where you're going is a very frightening experience. And I remember taking that group of women, and I remember my first experiences, and saying to them, okay, I'm going to put this canoe over my head, and I am not stopping until we're done with this 220 rod portage. I will come back for you. And knowing that people are coming back for them is probably the most important thing. Because once you're carrying all your packs, you don't stop. You keep going, right? And when you get to the end and you place it down by the water, the first thing we do is we turn around and we come back. And when I was on that trip with that group of women, I had one of the youngest and smallest women took the food pack, which is the heaviest pack on day one, especially because I packed baked potatoes. So it was extra heavy. And as she was going through this, she couldn't make it. And she stopped. And she sat there and she cried. And then she said, they're going to come back. They're going to come back. And it was probably 20 minutes or so that she had to wait, because you have to go all the way to the end and then come all the way back. And she sat in the woods, not someone who was comfortable being in the woods like that. There's nothing around you. And she kept thinking, they're going to come back. They're going to come back. That's what we do in leadership, right? We carry our weight, and we come back and we help other people carry their weight through it. And that's really a critical point of how we grow, and those first experiences that I had in the Boundary Waters, and how I could pass that along to others. And all of you have those similar experiences as well. The other piece that's interesting about the conscious competence versus the unconscious competence versus the unconscious incompetence is how we see the world. So when I was pulling together this presentation, I contacted my friend from college and said, do you have any pictures of this trip? You know, I had a couple from my camera that I had developed. She had a couple from her camera. This is not the days of, hey, I'll just text you that photo. This is the days of, I have to go somewhere and get it printed, and I may or may not have gotten the free doubles with it, so we don't know who has which pictures at the time. And so she said, sure, I'll send you some pictures. She sent me this. If you're not familiar with this, this is the bathroom accommodations in the Boundary Waters canoe area. And what I thought was so funny about this is, for me, I had been going up since a young child, so I didn't think about taking an actual picture and developing it of our bathroom. But for her, that was her first experience, and I'm really glad she did, because this is ours. I did not pull this off the internet. But to show that we all see this viewpoint differently when we're experiencing it. And so that's how we grow. Our goal is not just to have a camping experience. When I bring people to the Boundary Waters, my goal is to help them understand the beauty of it, the fact that they can actually do it, and to have them have an appreciation that hopefully they'll go again. When we started off on this journey, we had women on that trip with beautifully manicured hands. And on the way out of that trip, they were carrying the canoe. And it was a very different experience on the way out than on the way in. And that's how all of our leadership journeys are. Now I have one more competency that I've added, and I added this about a decade ago. I call this the reflective competence. The reflective competence is about looking back on the experiences that we've had and how are they today. And so when I go to the Boundary Waters, my favorite thing to do, and my son will attest to this, is I look for campgrounds, campsites that have big rocks. And I want a big rock because I want to sit and write in my journal. And that's what I do. This is me and my dog Yoda. And again, it's the 90s. So you can figure out where names are coming from. So this reflective competence about finding a place to write. Now, I don't collect knickknacks. It's just something that I don't necessarily do. But I tally up the number of active journals that I currently am writing in. And I have 10 that I'm currently writing in. My personal journal, 3 of my kids' journals. I have a cabin journal, a travel journal, an ideas journal, a writing journal, and I have a Boundary Waters journal. And I pulled out the Boundary Waters journal a few years ago because I have to be honest, I had a gap between when I traveled quite a bit in the Boundary Waters till more recently. I had career, I had doctorate, I had babies, I had a cabin. All those things came and they took time and energy away from this experience. But when I went and read about the Boundary Waters again, it was like I could breathe. When I went and took my first trip, again, more consistently, it was like coming home. Like I missed this experience. And I think there's times in our lives when we move away from what we once were passionate about because we get distracted. Other things come up and they're important and we need to do them as well. And then when we get back to it, man, we realize that we lost a part of ourselves. And so I spent time reading these journals again, and it had my words in them because I always tracked what lake we're on, what we did, what did it look like, how were things. But I also have other people write in my journals. And so anyone that I'm with writes in the journal. And they'll write about how difficult it was, but how fun it was. Generally, their favorite part about the experience is the food. And I tell my kids, the best macaroni and cheese you're ever going to eat is the macaroni and cheese you eat in the Boundary Waters. Because of all the work it took to make that macaroni and cheese. And that's what it is, right? The best experiences we have may not be the ones that are the easiest. Those best experiences, the ones that we remember the most, those are the ones that were hard, that we were grueling to get to. And so this is an important part of my process, is to go back and look at the experiences that we've had over time. So I'm going to ask you to take a few minutes here and think about your own conscious competence. What are the experiences that you've had as a leader, whether they be a camping experience or just throughout your career? What have you been a part of where you've experienced these consciousnesses and competence, where you remember yourself being in that first part of it and nervous about it and not even sure what you were going to do next, to now being someone who's just an expert on it? So I'm going to give you a few minutes to talk to your neighbors and explore this idea further, and then we'll come back.